Thank you, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. Repeat something I said this morning. This is, as Eleanor Hill said yesterday, the terrorists did the World Trade Center in Pennsylvania, the Pentagon. And that needs to be said because you want to free witnesses of any sense that we're going after people trying to place blame until we know a lot more. So that the terrorists are at fault, and that has to be made very, very clear. Now, you represent very key intelligence policymakers from the years before 9/11, as opposed to this morning's panel, which was some of each. And each of you has been involved for years in promoting reform. And I have here, just at random, just an endless series of reports, none of them thin, all of them huge, and all of them recommending how do you bring the intelligence community together to work efficiently. Before 9/11, when the world changed forever. There is an enormous reluctance to do this. From my observation, I don't think very much has been done in a larger systemic sense, and that troubles me. Each of you have already, in your own way, answered some of the questions that I have, but I want to follow up on them. You have the concept of how do you service customers. You suggested 7 approaches. General Scowcroft, you are at work on something which you're probably not free to discuss, but you have discussed with us in a classified setting, and so that the question of protecting the nation at home, prosecuting the war on terrorism here and abroad, occurs very deeply to each of you. The first thing that strikes me is, why is this so impossible? Why is there such an ethic against change? I can give you some answers, but I'm not interested in my answers. I'm interested in yours. Whenever one really goes at the subject of doing systemic change, if there was ever an opportunity that was handed this nation and this nation's intelligence effort, and beyond that, to reorganize ourselves in a way which protects the American people, which is our first responsibility under the Constitution, it is now. It is post 9/11. And you would think people would be coming out of the woodwork in ways to do that. But that is not happening. Changes are being made at the edges. People are taking those changes and making them appear to be enormous events when they're not. Because as you said, I forget your phrase, Mr. Berger, but it was something like jointness, the ethic of jointness. That we're all in this together, and that the intelligence communities are in this together. And yes, they do have separate missions, and they do represent certain things, but they also have their own campuses, and they have, they've grown up. NSA, no such agency, right? In other words, they've grown up within a climate of quiet uniqueness, their lives to themselves, nobody to intrude, their own memorial gardens, which are sacred, their own cafeterias, their own way of doing things. Directors come and go, the bureaucracy stays, nobody really challenges, and since 9/11, people have gotten very interested. The question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And, you just start with the question of no single person over all of this. And we were told this morning that the new Undersecretary for Intelligence will be able to do that, bring all the different threads together. Can an Undersecretary, in fact, do that? Just throwing some thoughts, and I want you to come back with some. I can't remember any director of the CIA who felt really at liberty with controlling only 15% of the budget, with the Department of Defense controlling 85% of the intelligence budget. to equal the 100%, that they felt really able to wander beyond what they had the power to participate in authorizing, their authorized limit, which in the case of the Central Intelligence Agency, which the American people think is the source of all intelligence, is 15%. Now, if there's a crisis, if a satellite goes dead, if something happens, can George Tenet and any of his predecessors, had there been similar situations, or whether there were or weren't, go to the Department of Defense and say, I need, X hundreds of millions of dollars to do this kind of thing, and will it happen? Probably not. Why? Because it's at least this senator's opinion that they know they're going to lose that effort to improve their efficiency. So, what do you make of a system where you have a 15%, 85% divide, where Mr. Berger is calling for a sharp increase in preemptive intelligence, and I agree with him. You can't make war without preemptive intelligence. You've got to have good intelligence before you make good war. And yes, the Defense Department has its own. But then what do you make of this? They have their own. The Central Intelligence Agency has its own. They both share, in a sense, the control of a variety of other agencies, but the budget belongs to the Pentagon. What is the fear? What is the political will fear? Is it just the fact there's so many campuses out there that are all complete and settled? Is it the fact that nobody wants to take a big risk, or nobody wants to take on the Secretary of Defense, or if they do that, they're taking on the President, maybe? I don't know. But I'm interested in why is it so hard to get us to focus, particularly now, on coordinating our intelligence efforts? That is my short question.
I'll try to give her a shorter answer than the question, Senator. You make a number of very good points. My guess is, if you look at those volumes that you showed us, they, in general, go in one direction, which is towards centralization of the intelligence community. The Department of Defense and the CIA, or the DCI, let me say, the Secretary of Defense and the DCI, were both established by the legislation, the National Security Act of 1947. And they were both sort of titular heads of agencies that were gathered together from out of the executive branches or executive departments of the government. Neither of them had significant powers. Now, over a period since then, the Secretary of Defense has accreted a great deal of power. He still is not probably quite so much a czar as most other cabinet heads are, but he has pretty much authority over his constituent elements. The DCI, despite his title of Director of Central Intelligence, has shared in no such accretion. There have been changes, and they have generally gone in that direction, but he still presides over a group of semi-autonomous agencies. Now, is that good or bad? Now, there are some people who say organizational blocks don't matter. It's the people. And if you get the right people in, you'll get the job done. But I think in part that's true. But a good organizational structure can't make up for bad personnel. But a good organizational structure can make good people more efficient at what they do. But every time you take steps to increase the authority of the DCI, you're taking authority away from somebody else. And no bureaucracy, no bureaucrat likes authority taken away from him. And so the resistance is significant. And by and large, there has not been the crisis within the intelligence community, as there has been in the Department of Defense, having to fight several wars since 1947, to get people to take that step. Now, that's a pretty broad answer, but is 9/11 that precipitating incident? I don't know. I would point out just one thing. In May of 2001, the President established in NSPD 5 a review of the intelligence community. And I was honored to chair the external panel of that review. And that was the sense that even before 9/11, that we had some problems here that need to be worked on. Now, that also conjoins me from getting into too much detail, because that report has been submitted and is still a classified report. But that's my initial response to you. It is the inertia, whether it's constructive or destructive, depends on your philosophy about organization and its connection to management.
Mr. Berger.
Why is it so hard to change? Perhaps, Senator Rockafeller, you should you should also have a panel of distinguished psychiatrists, maybe more illuminating. But let me give you my perspective on the intelligence side. I think that people tend to look at things from the inside out rather than the outside in. So change means, what about my carpool? And what about the project I'm working on? And how do I fit into the new office? And so there's a personal inertia. And then there's vested interest in the status quo. But I do believe 9/11 is an indispensable moment. And that's why I believe the work of this committee, this joint committee, is so important. Because the battlefield of the war is now here at home. And therefore, we have to be organized for that war. My own view, Senator, as I said in my remarks, I think organization does matter. I would have a director of Central Intelligence who had overall authority for budgets, planning, and priorities, working with his colleagues, not execution. He would not own the agencies, but he would have the ability to set overall priorities in concert with his colleagues under the direction of the President. Number two, as I indicated, I think there still should be 2 counterterrorism centers, but I think in the new Department of Homeland Security, there must be a fusion center. It's an analytical center. It's not a collection center, but its ability to take all of this information that you've been getting, all 400,000 documents, and try to see the patterns, that has the ability to task the agencies for collection, and seen as a full partner in the intelligence process. And third, I think there does still need to be a White House-focused coordinating mechanism, because policy and intelligence are linked together. My own view is best situated within the National Security Council than in a Office of Homeland Security. We can get into that later. It's a side issue. I think it's more central to the way we make decisions in this country involving national security. But I think this is the moment, Senator, that all of us have to try to change the way we do things.
And we can either do it, I'm mindful of my time, we can either do, and I have an FBI question for both of you. We can either say this is what it ought to be, but then if we try to do that, everybody say, oh, well, they're just fooling themselves, they're just naive, they're do-gooders. It'll never happen. It's politically not possible. You accept that, and then by definition you've immediately cut in half what it is that you seek, which will then be leveraged down to 25% or below. So I mean, I just want that out there. The horror of 9/11 and people talking about carpools and what kind of a nation are we with respect to change. We're capable of doing some rather extraordinary things, and this ought to be one of them. My second and last question has to do with the FBI. I'm interested, and I think that, Mr. Berger, you were fairly clear on this, and I think that you were too, General Scowcroft. I would be interested in the quality of the intelligence that you received, each of you in your own time, from the intelligence community as compared to the FBI, and I would put that within the following context. I do not understand why it is that you have the obvious situation of you collect intelligence internationally, and that's Central Intelligence and others, and then you collect it internally, and that can't be Central Intelligence because that's invasive and big government and all the rest of it and scary. Pass something called the Patriot Act, says, well, yes, you can cooperate on certain things, and then all of a sudden there's a little analytical group set up over an FBI of not very many people to do intelligence work. And they're trained in one kind of life. As you said, General Scowcroft, they're trained to do one set of things. They're not trained to do the other set of things. We don't have the time. It takes 5 years to train a good analyst. Anyway, and so why is it that we're trying to make the FBI do something which I don't basically think it can do from this senator's point of view? And I'm interested, one, in what your views are about that, and secondly, what was the quality of the feedback that you got from each of those two separate agencies on common threats?
Well, that's an interesting question, Senator Rockafeller, because, you know, as you first mentioned, I was thinking back intelligence from the FBI, intelligence information from the FBI, and I was trying to think of cases where we actually got it. Not very much, because I was focused on foreign intelligence primarily. There was some on counterintelligence issues where the FBI intelligence was particularly involved. And the one case I mentioned, Pan Am 103, that was investigative intelligence, and the FBI, together with the CIA, did an absolutely brilliant job on that. But I can't think of many, I can't right now recall any instances of pure intelligence product from the FBI. And I don't say that pejoratively at all.
And I don't ask it in that fashion,
Yes.
because what they do superbly.
They do superbly, and it would be a shame to say, now, FBI, you're going to focus wholly on intelligence collection, and we're not going to worry about law enforcement anymore. That would be a serious mistake. But I don't know how to answer your question, because I can't separate FBI intelligence out very well.
Senator, let me say first, there are extraordinarily dedicated people in the FBI, and we've seen that since 9/11 as we've looked back. And the FBI had some successes here, for example, in breaking up the '93 Day of Terror. But by and large, if there was a flood of intelligence information from the CIA, there was hardly a trickle from the FBI. I think that relates somewhat to how they saw their mission. I think it relates to their sense of the al-Qaeda fundamentalist threat in the United States, which I think either was much less by the end of 2000 than it seems to be today, or was underestimated, and the priority given to this area of counterintelligence. So it's a little bit like the person who looks for his keys under the light pole, because that's where the light is. We were getting a lot of information on foreign threats. We were getting very little information on domestic capabilities and threats, and that obviously influenced the focus.
I thank you both. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my questioning.